Hey friends, yes, it's me, your old pal Mike May again. Welcome back to the Suburban Hollywood Dudes Podcast with me, Mike May. Today I have a special guest, someone that many of you know and love out there, and certainly somebody that I know and love because he's my cousin slash brother slash someone that I worked with for many, many years, the fantastic, award-winning Bradford May. Everybody welcome my dear cousin, brother, Bradford May. Bradford, how are you?
Well, I'm happy to be with you here, Michael.
Thanks,
for
buddy.
sure.
It's so good to have you here.
My
Cheers.
brother. You are my brother.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
I wouldn't miss it. I'm very happy to be here.
Obviously, I've known you my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be fun for people to know when you first got in the business, what was your first job? How did you get there? And what was it like for you? So Brad's dad, my Uncle Harry, director of photography.
Yeah.
He's, Bradford, you got to come to work. What do you say?
I do remember my dad saying you have to pay $800 to get into the union, and
That's how much it was back then.
That's how much it was back
Jeez.
then, and I
What a bargain!
I found that, well, to me at that point it was like, how am I ever going to make $800
Right.
to pay this back?
What year was that? Do you remember?
It was 1970.
Wow.
Yeah, it was 1970. And my dad had his own commercial company. He was also under contract at Screen Gems as a commercial cameraman. But whenever he went out and did his own commercials for his own company, which was Desert Films in those days, I worked with him, and he set shots so that I didn't have to pull too much focus.
Right.
I worked at a high stop, and I learned from the bottom up. I started certainly having a family that was involved in it all my life.
Right.
I kind of figured that might be something that I was going to do, but I didn't really know what it was until I started working with other people, because it was my dad, and as much as I learned from him, it wasn't until I was able to branch off and do other work that I kind of found myself going, okay, this is something that I enjoy. It's not something just that my family was involved in, as so many are.
Right.
They take after their father, or their dad's a lawyer or a doctor, and they go to school to be those things.
Was Harry tough on you when you first got in, or was he pretty patient?
My dad was patient at the beginning, and then as I started going off and working with other people and came back to him, he could see what I had learned, and was very good at. My dad was a very patient man to begin with.
Yeah.
He started as a grip, and was actually holding the crane on a movie called Friendly Persuasion. Which my dad worked on with him, I believe. And Elrod Fredericks, was the cinematographer. And the zoom lens was going to be coming out, and Elrod said to my dad, he said, "You've got a great feel for the crane, and you got a great idea of what the camera is doing and what it's seeing," because in those days there was no video assist. There was none of that. And you looked through the eyepiece, and the operator said good, and the director had to go okay. And until you went to dailies the next day. But my dad was patient. From the time that he worked on Friendly Persuasion, he became an assistant cameraman.
Wow.
And a gentleman by the name of Herb Allard was in charge of, at that time, 659, and said a grip will never get into the camera department. But my dad befriended him, and lo and behold, just before Herb died, he was very instrumental with the union about getting me in. And the strange thing when you ask about that is that I was actually a minority back in those days. My mother's maiden name was Valdez. And my dad and Herb Allard figured out a way to get me a Group 1 card immediately. So I went to work at Universal in 1970 on a TV show called The Man in the City. The first assistant cameraman was Michael Genie. The camera operator was Charles Correll, and the director of photography was Enzo Martinelli.
Wow. But there's a great story with that.
I knew nothing about what it took to becoming a second assistant cameraman, because I'd always worked with my dad in doing commercials, just, futzing around.
What was the story on that show? You told it to me before. Please share that with our audience.
Well, I'm going to share it because it almost seems comical now, today. But Mike Genie said, grab the hi-hat, and I had never been around a lot of the equipment that we
Right.
used and what Universal had.
Right.
And so he said, I said, should I go to the wardrobe department for that or not? So I had no idea. And that's a true story. And Mike was very difficult on me and very hard to work with because he knew that it was because of the Valdez that I was a Group 1.
Right.
And he felt he was a staunch union guy.
Right.
He felt, there was a lot of other guys.
You cheated the system.
I cheated the system a bit. I didn't really cheat the system all that much, but my mother's name was Valdez.
Right.
So I got in and I started working at Universal in summer of 70, right after the 4th of July, as we often do,
Wow.
on a show that was going to run for 10 months,
Wow.
starring Anthony Quinn and Mike Farrell. And I remember Anthony Quinn, for some reason, took a liking to me. He just did. And I had hair down to here. I was wearing football shirts. I had no idea what the protocol was at Universal until I got called into the camera department by a gentleman by the name of Bill Wade. And Bill was a tyrant. You had to wear the proper clothes. You were in the camera department. And then those times when I first started, Michael, Lenny South and his crew wore suits and ties.
Right.
Working for Mr. Hitchcock at that time on the lot. So I had to kind of get with it and understand that being in the camera department was a little bit more than, what it was when I was wearing landlubber jeans and a pair of
Right.
tennis shoes and a football shirt with my hair down to here. And Bill would see the dailies because he
Right.
went to Technicolor every morning and watched all of the TV series,
Wow.
22 of them going on.
Wow.
But he knew exactly that what I was doing, what my hair was, because I went out and hit the slate,
Right.
marker, and off I
Wow.
went, and jumped behind some furniture and went, I'll never know where to put all of these lights.
Right.
So I guess I'm going to hit the slate all my life.
Right.
But Bill said, cut the hair and start wearing appropriate clothes.
Wow.
And I did that. And later on, Tim Wade, his son, one of his sons, I befriended and became great friends with, and
Of course.
worked with him on various shows, and then he became my camera operator and worked with me for quite a long time. I loved Timmy and always will.
I seem to remember working with him on occasion with you, Bradford.
Yeah,
back
well,
in the
that's
day.
when you started with us.
Yeah.
And it was the Twilight Zone series.
And it was after
very-
July 4th that we started.
Yeah, I
filming
was
that.
very, very fortunate. I had done a TV series called Simon and Simon, and the executive producer made me a cameraman. And later on, after Simon and Simon finished, he was hired by CBS to do
Is that
a
Phil
TV
DeGuerre?
series. Phil DeGuerre.
Yeah.
And God love him, he was instrumental in making me a camera operator. I was Tommy Del Ruth's operator
Yeah.
on 2 different pilots. One was called Pirates Key, which we did in Florida. And then in San Diego, we did Simon and Simon. And Tommy was off and running and didn't really want to do it. He said, you should use Brad. Bradford's going to be, he could do it.
And
Well,
how
here
old
we-
how old were you when that happened?
I was 29.
29 years old,
Yeah.
and you became a network cameraman.
A network cameraman at a major studio.
You're probably the
Universal.
first of your age to become.
I was the youngest cameraman of my era.
Wow.
Nobody at the studio could believe it.
Wow.
But Phil DeGuerre was an up-and-coming monster.
Right.
And he had been there for many, many years, working under Roy Huggins, as a lot of those, Steve Bochco, and a lot of them came from there out of Roy Huggins, who produced The Fugitive
Right.
and many, many other shows
Right.
after that, but kind of was the guru for that. So Phil kind of changed direction, and I became his project. And I was very, very fortunate to get Simon and Simon, although I had a line producer who didn't want me to do the job and was looking for me to falter at any time.
Right.
Because in those days, Michael, if you didn't make it as a cameraman, you had to go back to operating and at least stay for a year
Right.
before you were eligible to move up again. And I wasn't
Right.
about to do that.
Right.
So I went as fast as I could,
Right.
and doing the best work that I could do for its time.
Right.
Because we all grow and we all learn
Sure.
from what we do, and quality of light and composition and all those things. They take some time to learn.
Was there a lot of people that influenced you specifically? I know because I know the Bradford May style, the look, and everything else.
Right.
obviously we're influenced by people that we work with, but is there anyone in particular that you worked with that you just went, oh man, I love the way they do that. That's something I'm gonna hold on to and apply when I get my chance.
Well, as a cinematographer after my father, God love him, because he taught me so much. I think William Fraker.
Mm-hmm.
When I
and
started
what
working,
did you do with Fraker?
I did mostly commercials with Bill, up until the time that the commercials led to Bullet, and they brought me up there on the Z camera on the weekends to do some chase stuff, and I just loved the way Bill. We would all go back to the Holiday Inn on the wharf, and when I was done getting the film done and doing all the second assistant work that you do, I was one of the last guys into the bar. But Bill was always a storyteller,
Right.
not only filmically, but as a genuine human being,
Right.
and what it was to have people follow you in this industry. Why do people want to work for you?
Right.
And I think Bill, to answer that question, was one of the people that I thought, wow, he was never dirty. He would have these white shirts on and his white Jack Purcells and a pea coat. We'd be all frazzled from a day of work. Bill came in with a white beard and told the greatest stories because he had been around ever since my dad. I mean, he was a second assistant on Ozzie and Harriet.
Wow.
And when he moved up to full focus, when Conrad Hall moved up to be the camera operator, Bobby Marino was the cameraman. He'd go through a bottle of Maalox a day because he was so frightened of Ozzie.
Right.
Because Ozzie could fall asleep in the dailies and tell you where you missed focus.
Wow.
He was that strong of a filmmaker. People don't know enough about that, but Ozzie. But in answer to that question, I think William Fraker, award-winning, just a fantastic human being, and I wanted to be that. I wanted to be that for my crew. I wanted to be that for the actors. I wanted people to understand that I was there for them.
Right.
And I think he did that more that I know of, that I wanted to polish myself after.
It's interesting that you say that, wanting to be there for them, and it's something I took in my career as well. Because of that, the notion that you have this big machine in front of you that's documenting this acting from people, and it's an intimidating element being in front of a camera,
Yes.
And I think the more that we can make them comfortable, it makes the whole process work much better. And I certainly learned that from you, because it's, some people don't like that. They don't want the camera guys to say, don't talk to the actors. It's not, but it wasn't out of any other reason other than, hey, this is, if you move to your left and hey, how's it going? Yeah, do you mind? Hey, great. And you actually get things done.
Yeah, I'm not going into their performance per se, although
Right.
we all have a tendency to do that because, you're looking through the camera. You can see their blink, you can see their
Right.
movement, you can see all of that. So I always would lean on the camera operator once I became a director of photography and later on as a director, producer, whatever it was, that the camera department is kind of its own element. As much as it is part of the crew, they're kind of the rock stars of
Right.
it, and I think that actors know that. It's a very difficult job to be in any part of the
Sure.
camera crew, from hitting the slate to pulling focus. People don't realize, pulling focus back when I started is an impossibility.
Sure.
I mean, the lenses started opening to 1.3, 1.2. Guys wanted to dolly right at somebody. Oh, what does that lens open up to?
Right.
1.3. All right, we're 1.3. I know we certainly did that with Bruce Surtees, because Bruce, whatever the lens would open up to at night, that's what it opened up to.
Right.
During the day, whatever it closed down to, that's where he went.
Wow.
He would put no neutrals on the camera. He would shoot at 22. He would shoot through a pinhole.
Wow.
But that's where he thought the contrast that he wanted came from.
Wow.
So all the movies that Bruce Surtees, who had a fabulous father as well in the
Right.
business, that I related to, because
Right.
Bob Surtees was, a complete, genius at what he did
Right.
during his time.
Right.
Because the business changes constantly, with the advent of the new equipment and things like that. But I grew up in an age of film and 52-54, 52-47,
Right.
and what it did. So I just appreciated all of the people that I worked with, and then I created my own brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you did. Anyone that worked with me in that capacity went on to become DPs and create their own brand.
Sure.
The same way that I did through my dad, through Bill Fraker, Bruce Surtees, Jordan Cronenworth, Connie Hall, some guys that probably won't even be recognized later in life. And it's frightening to understand that we niche out this situation and it seems like we're going to go on forever.
Right.
But it's short-lived.
Yeah.
And anybody that can get in this business and have a good shot at it has great stories to tell, and that's what we're trying to do a little bit of today.
So, speaking of great stories to tell, there's a great story that, of course, I know, but I want you to share it with everyone. Detroit 9000.
Yes.
I think, were you a second on that?
No, I should have been. My dad wanted me to be a first assistant. But
so your dad was a DP.
My dad was a DP.
My dad was a key grip, right?
Yes. And I actually, being the first assistant, I drove with Bo Marks. His father was the director, Arthur Marks.
Wow.
And Bo and I drove my dad's insert car across country to Detroit.
Wow.
And then when I got there, of course, I pulled focus, but we took my dad's insert car back there. It took us 6 days, and driving 40 miles an hour.
Right.
But Detroit 9000, yeah, my dad, Arthur Marks, big people on the show, small movie,
right?
Big people, independent little movie, but I learned so much from people like Bud Alper, who was the sound mixer, and he said, "Hey, always say sir and thank you and please,"
right?
Because sometimes we get that thing, bring that over. There's a certain sensibility that I always wanted to have, which was the king of cool. Everybody is loved.
Yeah.
Everybody is
Nothing hard
part
about
of
that.
making the movie.
Yeah.
I worked for so many people along the way that thought they were doing it by themselves.
Right.
And, we'd all roll our eyes and go, okay, we'll try to do it. But,
right.
If you did it by yourself, there'd only be one lunch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's plenty of lunches there for
absolutely.
everybody.
Well, one thing about Detroit 9000 is the famous story that we talked about and laugh about is when an actual gunfight occurred while you were shooting.
Yes.
So if you can tell that.
I will tell that because your father, one of the greatest key grips of all time, and ran with his own moniker of Chainsaw for many, 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 many years. I loved with all my heart. And, here I am doing a movie with my father as a cinematographer. My uncle is the key grip. There's Timmy Griffith, who great gaffer as well, big time gaffer. And these guys, and Frankie Keever, I believe, was on the show for a little while. They would just absolutely beat the shit out of me. Your dad would never let me ride the dolly back. Get off the dolly. You don't need to ride the dolly. You don't have to do all that. But it gave me a sensibility of not only family, but what it is to work. But the story when we started prepping, I had just driven the insert car across country, and now I have to start prepping the camera equipment. Right. And your father, Tommy May, and myself are doing the last loading of the 40-footer. I think it was one of Gene Levy's vehicles, creative vehicles that we had. And it was a 40-footer, so everybody's on the 40-footer, camera, sound, grip, electric, everybody, props, everybody's on this, what they called the one vehicle, kind of like Cinemobile, but it was a 40-footer. And all of a sudden we're in Detroit. Now I've heard about Detroit, and certainly Detroit's probably a lot worse now with what's going on in the world, but this is 1972, maybe 3, and your dad and I are loading the truck, and all of a sudden we hear gunshots. And around the corner and heading right for the back end of our truck, your dad was on the tailgate.
Oh, God.
I was doing something on the table, getting ready to put some stuff out there, camera-wise. And there's gunshots. And they were coming right by the truck. And I'll never forget your dad saying, "Jump in the jockey boxes, Bradford. They're shooting real bullets." And I have to tell you, I'd never been around anything like that before.
Wow.
I don't know if your dad had or not.
Right.
But I jumped in the jockey box as fast as I could. I went out the side stairs, jumped in, and they went by. The next day, your dad and I were shooting in a hospital as part of the show. And we were shooting in the lobby, and we had to get the dolly in and the equipment to take the elevator to go up to another floor. We were going to continue some shooting in the hospital room. Well, the damn elevator stopped at the morgue.
Oh, God.
And the elevator doors open, and your dad and I are standing there. He's got the dolly, and I have the camera. I'm holding the camera, so it doesn't jiggle and everything. And there's, unfortunately, dead bodies from the gunshots that took place the night before.
Wow.
So that was my initiation into Chicago. But Detroit, and I told that story when your dad got his award from SOC. But it just the craziness of here we are there making a movie about bad guys and good guys and cops, and we're right in the middle of it as we prepped. And that show I almost got electrocuted on as well because Earl Gilbert, who just passed away, one of the best gaffers, was using what they call master lights, which were AC.
Mm-hmm.
And we were shooting all day in a cemetery, soaking wet, raining, constantly wet. And I went out to take a tape measure, and I kicked one of the stands. Oh, Jesus! I get that. I'm not trying to relight, and I grabbed onto the master light.
Right.
That was the last thing I remembered.
Wow.
Your dad thought quickly, kicked the light out of my hand because he couldn't grab it.
Sure.
He kicked the light out of my hand. The last thing I remember, I was laying down. My eyes were going round and round, and everybody was looking down at me.
Oh
I had become a conductor.
Wow.
With the rain and everything that was going on, because I had a hold of the camera, and I went to move. So your dad kicked it out of that. So Detroit has some wonderful memories for me, but the doctor said, don't play with anything electrical. Your body is almost like copper.
Wow.
So for some reason, I'm very susceptible to getting shocked. And but it was a great shoot. But
that's why you have amazing energy, man.
I guess so. Maybe that's what it did. I don't know. I've always had that energy, even as an assistant camera operator, because I have passion.
Yes.
I have such a love, not only for what we do filmically, but for all of those people that make the movie with you. Yeah. It's such an extraordinary group. I've always related it to sports. I've always related it to, the assistant cameraman, he's a great third baseman. He's going to have to hit his 30 home runs this year for us to be good, because I don't do it by myself. I can't. Whether I was, I could be the greatest director of photography or director or whatever. Nobody's the greatest. We all do what we think is best at the time. But never did I ever forget about the humility and being a humanitarian towarse the crew, because coming up through the ranks, I didn't always get that.
Well, and you knew what that was like as well. Yeah, the thing about...
And I know you've used that.
Well, yeah.
And you were taught that, but you also have it in you. It has nothing to do with being taught. You can be taught something. And you can become an asshole. Okay, and I worked for many of them.
Sure, like we all have.
You ran out of film, okay. I mean, but as long as you only make the mistake once. You need to learn from that. But I always, and I am that kind of a person overall, I just love people. Unless they do me wrong, I just love people, and I love bringing them together. I love the fact that we're all a team and that we're all working together.
It's a great satisfaction when that all comes together.
Tremendous. And I've worked with so many wonderful actors, producers, directors, crew, that it's just been a wonderful journey.
I want to talk.
Hey friends, I know it looked like I cut that video short, but I'll have a whole nother episode with Bradford May, and it's just as good as the first one. So be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe and leave a comment if you want. Let me know if you're liking the Suburban Hollywood Dude Podcast, and we'll see you next episode. Thanks so much.